Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Catholic Education Foundation podcast number 23. This podcast will feature Rick Arnold, the Executive Director of the Catholic Schools Athletic Association, the CSAA, along with the Catholic Education Foundation President, Rich Lechleiter. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Hey, we're here.
What's up, T?
Hey, listen, obviously, Rich knows this. I'm super pumped about this podcast. This is in my wheelhouse. When we're talking CSAA sports, that's my passion. So I can't wait to kind of get into this and dive in pretty deep here.
Yeah. It's a special thing to talk about.
It is. And Rich, I mean, I know we're going to get into this a little bit, but the partnership here has just been fantastic between the CSAA.
Yeah, we love it. We'll talk
Foundation.
about that later, but it's one of I think the neatest sort of original things that we've done in a long time, and I think it's great for the kids.
Totally agree. All right, Rick, let's start with you here. First of all, thank you for joining our show.
No, thanks for having me. Thanks to Rich for having me as well.
And I listen, you've got one of the best jobs around. I'm envious of it for sure. Who doesn't get excited about grade school sports, right? Catholic grade school sports. So let's talk about how you got started on this pathway. Give us a little bit of your background.
Well, my background really consists of two careers. I was a policeman with the Jefferson County Police and then the Louisville Metro Police Department for almost 22 years, retired in 2012, and later that same year started with the CSAA. So I've had almost 12 years now, almost 12, of time with the CSAA. So I'm in the middle of a second career, which I love, and it's been quite an honor to be. I'm the third executive director behind Mr. Carl Schmidt, Mr. Jim Frame. So it's a real honor to follow those two legends.
Well,
really
you've
cool.
got a sports background.
I do.
Dive into that a little bit.
I did. I played baseball in high school, and then I played baseball at the University of Louisville. Played at Trinity High School from 83 to 86, and then in college from 87 to 90.
Right.
And then dabbled around a little baseball for a few years after that, and then started working in the police department.
I was walking a Trinity hallway the other day, and I saw an Arnold there in the Hall of Fame. Is that your dad?
That is my uncle.
Your uncle, okay.
My uncle, yes. And my dad has got some. He's not a Hall of Famer there, but he was the first ever development director at Trinity High School back in the 70s.
There you go. See,
Man, they're everywhere. I mean, the Arnolds are everywhere, aren't they?
Ties everywhere. I mean, it's how Louisville works. All right, so the CSAA's obviously been around a long time, right? So let's talk about the organization's history and some of the folks that really made it what it is today.
Well, I can tell you that the history of the CSAA is really unique, and I know we've talked about this, off the mic here a little bit in the past, over the past year or so, but Carl Schmidt and his family, I mean, it was a true family. That CSAA was a family endeavor, and I know that from talking to his daughters and his children and his grandsons. And one of his grandsons was a strength coach of mine in college at U of L. And the history of the Schmidt family in Louisville, to Carl Schmidt Jr., with his role with sports in Louisville, and he's a Hall of Famer in his own right. It was a true family event. The family talks about they would go to the fields and stripe the fields for the first football games in the history, in the history of CSAA football. And Carl Schmidt started the KFOA, which is the Kentucky Football Officials Association. So the Schmidt family is there's not a more important family in sports and Catholic sports, period, probably in the country, but for sure in Louisville.
Well, they'd stripe the field, and they'd be the referees, and they'd run the gate. They'd do it all.
They did it all. And Mr. Schmidt, of course, he retired shortly after I played at Toy Bowl in 1982. Okay. But he retired a couple years later. But never having been fortunate enough to know him, but getting to know his family's been one of the more important things, and one of the best things I've been able to experience as the director of the CSAA.
So when we talk about CSAA sports, now obviously we talked about the Schmidt family, who's had such a direct impact on organizing and creating the CSAA, but man, the impact that the CSAA has had on young Catholic children is pretty incredible.
Yeah, listen, I can talk about it for 4 hours, but in a nutshell, there's not one Catholic school student that's played a sport that I know of in this city, in this country, that doesn't remember something about their Catholic school sports experience. And again, of course, it starts with the Catholic schools, correct? Without question. But sports are a big part of that. A big part of these parishes, a big part of what goes on. It's a draw. It's a reason some people stay in schools. We hope they're there for the right reasons, for academics first, but certainly athletics plays a big part in that. So we take a lot of pride in what we do, and certainly it's not the easiest job all the time in terms of making everybody happy, because I was told by a dear friend of mine, Buzzy Heim, when I first started, man, every time you make a decision, you're going to make half the people mad and half the people happy, and that's really turned out to be
true. That's absolutely the case. Hey, Rich, your kids went through CSAA sports, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they all went to Holy Spirit, and my boys went to X, and daughter went to Sacred Heart, and that's that kind of beginning of that springboard for them in sports was just led them to a lot of great things in their life, not just academic or athletic development, but I would say developing them as a more full person, and as somebody that understood how to lose. And how to win properly, and kind of conduct yourself with what I would call dignity and grace. I think that's learned a lot through sports.
That's a great way to put it. And the thing that is so special in my eyes with a lot of the CSAA sports is you have guys. So the parish that we're members at is Ascension. He just passed away, but we had a basketball coach that was there for 47 years. 47 years he was the boys basketball coach.
Yeah, Joe Shooter.
I mean, just the way that they are investing in these young people's lives is incredible. Hey, he was a great mentor.
When I played in the Grown Men's League at Ascension, Joe was our coach, right? I mean, he a lot of investment in people.
Unbelievable. We've had one guy named Tom Cushing. He's been there forever, and they're there for the right reasons. It's not to win championships.
No.
It's there to invest in these young people.
Let me add this to you, because Rich touched on it. The social and the emotional development are the most important factors. The winning and losing, that's part of the social and the emotional development. Learning how to win with grace and dignity, learn how to lose and get better from it is how you succeed in life, in business, as a husband, as a wife, as a son or daughter. And those are the things that my mission as the director are to stress those things to our coaches, because our coaches have the biggest impact on our kids. Our coaches and our coordinators. So
100%. 100%.
Well, and this thing by and large is volunteer run.
Oh, yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't understand how deep this thing goes in terms of volunteers, and hundreds of them.
Right.
Yep.
And athletic directors at all these places work their tails off to make this stuff happen. The coaches are phenomenal.
Yep.
Okay, and all that effort goes into that sport or that team. And I just think the output's amazing. I really do.
Well, listen, Rich, when we're promoting Catholic schools, one of the main things we promote is the community. Because you get a community at these Catholic schools that are second to none. And the sports is a big piece of that community. Without the sports, starting as early as 3-year-old, JK, pre-K, kindergarten, now CSAA doesn't start till 3rd grade. But a lot of these sports start really, really early, and it's just part of the community. It's part of what you get involved in when you get into a Catholic parish.
Yeah, it's a great draw. It certainly was for my family. For many, many years, we had 4 children go through Catholic schools, and that Holy Spirit stretch was like 16 or 17 years. Man, it felt like 37.
Oh yeah.
But it really was a draw for our family.
Right.
I mean, it's something we look forward to as a family to participate in, and so many other families felt the same way, and you could just feel the vibe, and it's the best.
It is the best.
I think that vibe is everlasting. And look, every school in our system has some type of a music program, or maybe has a drama program, or they put on a play. And they all do it to various levels, but every school, including the really small schools, have the opportunity to participate in CSAA sports. Every single school.
Every single one.
And even the schools that have 10, 12, 14 kids in a class can still participate.
Hey, the answer is yes.
Sports.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. Everybody gets a shot.
Yeah, everybody gets a shot.
Everybody plays.
Well, let's talk about everybody plays. So, Rick, what are some of the new kind of sports, some of the new things that are happening at CSAA that are exciting right now?
Well, we've got a lot of them, I think, Teague, and certainly, what's new is also what's old in some cases. But the newest sport we've kind of taken on under our wing is archery, and our director Laura Parrish does a great job with archery. It's a one-time-a-year event, much like our swimming and our tennis and our golf, our individual sport championships. But our schools, most of our schools shoot in multiple archery events through the course of the year. I know Ascension hosts one. I know St. Gabriel does several. Schools that host them, and they have different events they participate in. And then we have the CSAA championship, which is for the CSAA trophy, which is, as we all know, people are willing to fight over that a little bit.
It's coveted for sure. And archery is such a great sport because, in my experience, that's been the kids that don't really get involved in a whole lot of other stuff. It's not your normal, your basketball, your baseball, your football players. It's the kids that haven't really found their niche, and then they find it in archery, and they just take off and run with it. That's why I think it's so awesome.
Yeah, it certainly is growing, and it's, the KHSAA sponsors it, and it's a unique sport because, there are a lot of kids that maybe don't do a lot of other sports, but they get into that. And there's, like the Bullitt County schools, and some of those schools tend to be a little a little better in general,
They're
but
they're
it doesn't
practicing in
mean
their
that a school
backyard.
from another part of town can't be great. It's just that it tends to be what your passion is, and anybody that doesn't have something else that they get into athletic wise can get into archery and get good at it pretty quick if they practice a lot.
Yeah, and so the other big one is girls flag football, which we'll get into here a little bit too.
Yes,
But boy, that's really taken off like crazy.
Absolutely.
it's blown up.
I mean, and so Rick and I had this conversation offline. Football numbers are up for boys tackle. And he seems to think, and him and some of the other football guys seem to think that it has large in part has to do with girls flag football. It's become cool again. All the girls play and they love it.
Yeah.
And now the boys are like, well, I want to play football too. And so it's like it's made it cool again, right?
Well, we had those discussions when we were talking about taking on girls flag football. When we had a couple of schools, Bernard and Margaret Mary, that hosted a leagues for years, but they weren't run by the CSAA office. And when we were considering it, it was. I mean, again, I've said this before. My biggest issue was there was no governing body for flag football,
Right.
and when USA Football and Nike Football and some of these organizations got involved and it became a college sport at the lower levels, it enabled us to be able to take on and have some guidance.
Yeah.
And having that guidance is important. And then we have our special rules. But I mean, yes, one of our goals was to get more people involved in football, period.
Yep, right.
And the girls have attracted some of the boys back into it. I really believe that. We'll never be able to prove that, but I really believe that.
So both your daughters went to Sacred Heart, correct?
Yes, mine did.
Did they have a flag football league when your daughters were there?
No, I don't think so.
They do now. And I saw a post the other day where they had over 100 girls that participate in an intramural Sacred Heart only flag football league. How cool is that?
Yeah,
Wow,
that's a byproduct of the pink-white game, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, that's right.
And my daughter played volleyball at Sacred Heart, and one of her best friends who was involved in the pink-white game was a Division I college player. Actually played in the same conference as she did. I think blew out her knee in that game. So they get after it. They
Wow.
play hard, and injuries do happen. It's
Yeah.
a part of any sport or athletic endeavor.
Sure. Yeah, but it's been listen, the way that girls flag football has taken off has been incredible. All right, Rich, let's get to this piece because the foundation has found yet another way to assist Catholic school families. So tell us about the new and exciting partnership with the CSAA and kind of what it means to everybody involved.
Yeah, this started maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and one of our families called that we helped. I forget which school it was, and they said, "Gosh, I appreciate the tuition assistance, so my kid can go there, but my kid wants us to play sports, and there are fees associated with sports. You got to play sports, and we don't cover that.
Sure.
We do tuition and tuition only. So we got to thinking about, gosh, what could we do to enable a kid who we've actually gained access to a Catholic school, get them involved in sports, right? We want all our kids playing sports.
Right.
And we started talking to you, started talking to Rick, and just kind of came up with this, kind of creative approach that says, let's serve it, meaning CEF, let's serve as a sponsor of some sort to promote CSAA sports and also to augment some of the cost that families have to pay, in this program. So I guess last year, our first year, we launched a kind of a co-sponsorship. We were the lead sponsor for the Toy Bowl for the first time. And we also sponsored the basketball championships as well. And in each of those two events, we funded $25,000 toward their success. Now, what that money means to families is no increases that they have to pay at the parish level to play sports.
Right.
So it kind of put a cap, if you will, on the growth and the cost of actually participating. So the families, all of our families benefit in part from that investment.
So
we're proud of it.
Let's take that one step further. So what Rich is alluding to there is what the CSAA calls franchise fees.
Correct.
And so that investment that the CEF has made into the CSAA has enabled the CSAA to not have to, at least this past year, to increase franchise fees.
That's correct. And when we started talking to Rich and the CEF and coming together on the sponsorships, which are important, right? I mean, that the Toy Bowl and the basketball championships are a big brand, and having the CEF's name in front of that is a huge boon for us, and we certainly hope it is for the CEF. But the idea of the franchise fees and not increasing was kind of a at first, until we started talking about sponsorship money, it was a hard thing for us to consider, because every year we have we have officials fees go up, we have costs go up, and look, with COVID, quite frankly, we were bankrupt. I mean, we were out, we were done,
really struggling,
spoken for, and then with the start of girls flag football, which you previously mentioned, a little revenue, a little more generation of revenue, and then the sponsorship, and the idea when Rich and I first talked about it was what can we do, and we talked about the idea of keeping costs down. And I'm like, that's a great way to get families more involved, and we can do that with this revenue, and certainly we've done that, and I tell you, we took a big hit with football officials fees again this year because we don't control that with the football officials because the KFOA sponsors it, and they've got to meet their bottom line as well. But not being able to or taking on that increase in officials fees would have normally meant a $50 or $100 increase in franchise football fees,
right?
Football franchise fees.
Sure.
But
which
thanks to our partnership,
which gets passed to the parents is kind of what happens.
It gets passed on to the parents and the families. And thanks to our partnership, we did not have to do that this year. So we are very grateful for our partnership.
No, it's fantastic, I think, and look, our slogans are very similar, right? Everybody plays at CSAA, and the answer is yes at the CEF. So that kind of outreach and inclusion of families on both sides of this thing is a really super common theme, and I think one that we ought to do more stuff together.
Rich, and it goes back to the Carl Schmitz and the Jim Frames of the world. The mission of the CSAA and the vision was sports to include all kids.
Absolutely,
I mean, every kid is included.
Well, hey, listen, I've got a perfect example for you. We highlighted a young man by the name of Luis Garcia at the Salute Dinner this past year. Luis is a great kid. Would not be at Ascension if it wasn't for the help with the CEF. And he's going to play basketball this year for the first time. And he can't. That's awesome. He can't wait. And here's what's so fun about this: does Luis know how to play basketball? Not really, but guess what? He gets to play.
Right.
He doesn't get cut. There's a team for him because of how the CSAA is set up. There's a league that he's going to be able to play in and have fun and get to enjoy that sport and that vibe with his friends.
He gets to go to gym with music and referees instead of playing in his backyard by himself or with his buddies in his neighborhood.
It's just so cool. In a public school, he would never have that opportunity because it's. You've got 12 kids and they make cuts and it's just hard to make. Right. But everybody plays and it's just such a special thing.
And it's something he's never going to forget.
Exactly.
He'll never forget.
He'll never
My
forget
8th grade year, man, I played basketball at Ascension. Yeah. I was on the team.
He was on the team.
Yeah.
And who knows? He may end up being phenomenal. Who knows? I mean, it's just so cool.
He may go into a job someday where he's working for a basketball organization.
Right.
I mean, who knows what he's going to do?
Just having that experience too just helps.
Oh, it's huge.
All right. Well, this is our November podcast, and this is not by mistake. This is because it's time for the Toy Bowl, and everybody gets super excited. This year is our 74th annual Toy Bowl.
Wow.
Rick, how far back does this date? Give us a little bit of history here.
Well, the history is pretty extensive, and again, thanks to Carl Schmidt and his family, and continued by Jim Frame. But the first Toy Bowl was actually in 1949.
Okay, 49, which obviously that's why it makes it the 74th.
Wow. Right, it makes it the 74th Toy Bowl this year, and that game was actually played at Old Mill High School at Maxwell Field. Remember that? Rich,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's a brook in Breckenridge Street. Tiki, you've probably never been down there.
Don't have an idea.
But been there many times, and that old field there was a big brick wall around it, and it was the old Mayo High School, and the first Toy Bowl was played there. St. Agnes beat St. Elizabeth 13-6 in Toy Bowl 1.
Now, where was St. Elizabeth at?
I'll defer to Rich on that.
That would have been over in Germantown.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
now,
it was over in Germantown.
Wasn't there a Toy Bowl played at Freedom Hall?
There was. In 1958, it was the 10th anniversary of the Toy Bowl, ironically enough. Toy Bowl was played inside Freedom Hall. It's a little known fact. It was
inside Freedom Hall.
Played inside Freedom Hall. When I go back and talk to Mr. Frame and Julie Sattel, who was our longtime assistant in our office, the stories I hear about that game, and it's been written up a few times. There's some stuff you can find in some of the archives about it, but that game was a 26-0 Holy Cross over Our Lady of Lourdes, ironically. But it was inside Freedom Hall, and it was a dirt surface. They couldn't bring grass in the 50s, right? They couldn't make it survive inside. It was a dirt surface that they painted green.
Wow.
And then put white stripes over. And
how about that?
The complaint on it was that all the uniforms were filthy green from green paint and even stained and ruined.
I'm sure those lines didn't last very long either.
No, they didn't. There's a few pictures of it. It's really cool. They had a king and a queen's court, homecoming king and queen, or Toy Bowl king and queen, I should say. And there's pictures of that. It's a really neat, really neat history. And the idea was an indoor game. And I've been told it was one of the early indoor games of football and in youth football, and maybe the first ever in the state of Kentucky.
Well, that was Freedom Hall was constructed in the early 50s,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
it was basically a brand new facility.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they were growing they were diversifying their interest in the facility, and the Toy Bowl was in there, and in between Toy Bowl 1, which is at Maxwell Field, and Toy Bowl 10, which is in Freedom Hall, they played at Parkway Field down at U of L. So they had a relationship at the time down there.
And what's cool about the Toy Bowl too? There's so many stories. I played it. Ascension never had one, so we never made to the Toy Bowl when I was there. But my dad, who went to St. Raphael, who's 75 years old, he played in a Toy Bowl.
Yeah.
It's the history is just so extensive there.
It is, and there's a lot of. I mean, again, I played in Toy Bowl and won in my 7th grade season. My son at St. Albert played in 7th grade and won. So there's some nuances and things, and I know there's some coaches that bleed Toy Bowl, Toy Bowl blood, and
Yeah, they do.
I mean they do, and they tell the stories, and I mean, and even some of those guys have even gone on to play, in college and in the NFL, but some of these coaches that live it, they have a way of getting their kids fired up if you get to a Toy Bowl.
Oh, it's pretty cool. And then the atmosphere is so great. Obviously the whole school, the whole again the community comes out and
Right.
supports. It's
Oh,
just such a cool environment. So let's talk a little bit about that, Rick. So the November 4th, the 5th and 6th grade will be at St. X.
That's correct. 5th and 6th grade Toy Bowls. And let me add something to that, Teague, too. The first, we talk about these early Toy Bowls in the late 40s, 49 through the late 50s, but the first 5th and 6th grade Toy Bowl was in 1966. So we've had 6th grade and 8th grade Toy Bowl games since 1966, which is really, I'm really proud of that fact in terms of being an employee of the CSAA, because it's easy to have the 8th grade one. That's your prestigious event, but we have one for the 5th and 6th, and we don't do it for 3rd and 4th because we still consider that the developmental level, but we do a 5th and 6th championship and a 7th and 8th, and we've had an ongoing 6th grade Toy Bowl since 1966.
Now, the 7th and 8th has been at Trinity for a very long time, right?
Yeah, it's been at Trinity. It's been continuously at Trinity High School since 1971.
Okay.
And it was there. It was there for like 6 other years in the 60s, and then they had played for 3 years. Actually, I've got it written down somewhere, but they played at Trinity in like 62, 63, and 64, something like that.
Here the old original field right there.
Yeah, the original Trinity field. Yeah, they played there in 66, 67, 68. And 69, and then at 70 it was back at the fairgrounds, and then from 71 on it's been the 8th grade Toy Bowl's been at Trinity, and before then again it was Freedom Hall, the fairgrounds, Parkway Field, or one game at Maxwell Field and one game at Manual Stadium.
And then when St. X built their field, they've hosted 5th and 6th grade since.
St. X has hosted 6th grade Toy Bowls, I think, since 2001, continuously since 2001. Yes, and those 6th grade Toy Bowls were at St. Rita and St. Dennis, and they were all over the place. Yeah, different fields, and then they started a few of them were at St. X too, and the Holy Cross High School hosted a few of them, and then from 2001 on, it's the 6th grade Toy Bowl's been at St. X.
I get that that comment all the time and that question all the time. Why is the 8th grade always at Trinity and the 5th and 6th grade always at St. X?
Yeah, the answer I'll give to that is tradition, and it's been there. It's been there so long. I'm not about to change it or ask for it to be changed. And our board of directors,
before your time.
Well, long before my time. Long in 71. I mean, I was born 2 years before that. So the reality is that they were playing there before I was born too. But we have tremendous relationships with Trinity and St. X, and we're very thankful for all they do.
Yeah.
And the track meet at St. X. I mean, there's no place better maybe in the country for a track meet from a high school or grade school perspective. So, and we've got the 6th grade Toy Bowls there, and DeSales and Holy Cross. They pitch in and do everything that they can, and the same with the girls' schools. The reality is that we try to play as many of these championship events at the high school venues where practical, where reasonable, and where time and ability allows us to. But at the end of the day, without their commitment to us, none of the schools, the boys or girls schools, we would be able to do it without their commitment and their stewardship to us as well.
Well, the flag football was played at Assumption's facility last year.
Yes. It was, correct.
Which was a great facility. The place was packed.
It was packed.
That was some event to see. It really
was.
Yes.
And they did a great job hosting that event. And this year it'll be at
Sacred Heart. That's correct.
And so is that the plan to kind of go back and forth there? Or?
Yeah. So again, with the boys' Toy Bowls, the tradition, the history's in place. With the girls' Toy Bowls, we reached out to the schools, and those were the two schools that reached back out and have jumped on board wanting to host it. And until one of them says they don't want to host it, we will alternate it every other year.
Yeah, they're great. They're both great venues. They really are.
Oh, they're
great
awesome
facilities.
venues. Amazing.
Yes.
Now, are we calling it the Girls Toy Bowl?
It's the Toy Bowl. I mean, it's the girls' flag Toy Bowl.
Okay,
flag football
and that
Toy
makes
Bowl.
sense. I mean, listen, in a lot of ways, it's as popular as the boys. It doesn't have the tradition, but boy, it's starting to get the numbers of people there, and it's pretty cool.
The crowd is
It's pretty wild.
And they
it's
take it
not
serious.
much different in terms of the numbers of people in the stands.
No,
They certainly are intense. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the name Toy Bowl. The Toy Bowl name actually comes from Birmingham, Alabama. Carl Schmidt and his team of trusted associates, I guess, there was a Catholic league in Birmingham that had a championship called the Toy Bowl, and they asked for permission to use that name, and it's stuck ever since.
Interesting.
So, isn't that interesting? I mean,
did not know that.
Not a lot of detail in that, but they asked to borrow that name. They liked the name, and there's a misnomer that the 5th and 6th grade, because I can remember when I was at St. Martha way back when I was in 6th grade, or 5th and 6th grade football, and we didn't play the Toy Bowl then, but they there was a sentiment that was called the Peanut Bowl, and that is, as Julie Sattel so eloquently says, Mr. Schmidt would roll over in his grave if he heard somebody call that the Peanut Bowl,
Right.
Because it was a Toy Bowl. The 5th and 6th was a Toy Bowl, and the 7th and 8th grade was a Toy Bowl. But there were many
I've heard that
coaches,
before.
that I know, like respected coaches, that called it the Peanut Bowl, and I think that was just because it was different than the Toy Bowl. But it was never intended to be anything but the 5th and 6th grade Toy Bowl, 7th and 8th grade Toy Bowl. And when I made the determination on the girls, and we talked about this,
Yeah, we did.
we talked about it at some meetings and so forth. There was once I gave it some real thought. There was no question that was
It's
going
a
to be the Toy Bowl.
It's a Toy Bowl.
It's the girls' Toy Bowl.
That's what it is.
It's what it is.
It's gotta be.
It's a girls' Toy Bowl. And there's two of them. There's a 5th and 6th, just like there's a boys.
Yep.
There's a 7th and 8th, just like the boys.
Yeah. Rick, give us some sense of how much work goes into each one of these sports programs. Like from the athletic director standpoint, the coaches, the staffs, the volunteers. It takes quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's gotten more complicated here in the last 10 years with these mergers and these what I call partner schools. And it's a shame, but there used to be 25 schools that played football, and then 15 years ago there might have been 15 that played football,
Right.
and now we've got 7 programs, and
Right.
and they're all merged, and hence girls has come along, programs are growing again. We hope to go back to some individual schools having their own teams.
Yep.
And
I think that's going to happen.
I hope it does. That's our long-term goal, or mid-range goal, I guess would be a better way of putting it. And if we can get 1 or 2 on board, I think there'll be more. Tig, you mentioned earlier in this chat about the spirit, and I know my wife said when we were at Ascension before my kids graduated from St. Albert, but when they were at Ascension in 5th and 6th grade, that we were merged with St. Martha at the time. It was just Martha and Ascension, and now it's Martha and Ascension and
It's 9 schools.
Rayfield, and it's St.
John Paul.
John Paul and Agnes and Francis and
Nativity.
James and Nativity and St. Stephen and Rayfield. And the reality of that merger is it's a huge merger, but all those schools are moderate to smaller schools,
Right.
and there's not one color, right?
Yeah.
There's not one blue or green or red or yellow or black. It's a whatever they decide on is their color. But if you're at one school, if you're St. Rayfield and your colors are green and white, and your team's wearing blue because for whatever reason that's what the colors decided on. We went through that process. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. I know Tom Wachtel and I are long time and unbelievably outstanding football coordinator. When we were going through doing some of these partner things, because for several years, my first several years on this job, we had every year different schools partnering up for football because they didn't have numbers one year, they might have them the next, so they had to partner one year, and the next year they wouldn't need that. And then you had you had equipment expenses and uniform expenses, and then it got not getting used the next year. So we kind of Tom and I talked it out. We decided we would kind of geographically look at a map of the Archdiocese and say these are the schools we want to stick together, and that's how this partner school system kind of evolved. And the thing that's really unique about it is that, and we talked about this, and it's an important part of our sponsorship with the CEF and our passion for these kids. But if we have schools, Southeast Catholic, for instance, is St. Edward and St. Gabriel and St. Rita and
Right.
St. Bernard and
Right.
who am I leaving out?
I think that's it.
Bernard, Edward, Rita, Gabriel. If one of those Athanasius,
That's
if
right.
one of those schools only has 4 girls in the 8th grade basketball level, well, they partner with one of their schools in their partner school system.
Right.
They can pick whatever they want,
Right.
and they can all hold each other accountable.
Right.
That they're not just picking the school that gives them the best chance of winning or the best chance of this or that. Pick out the school that you have something in common with, and that the other schools agree that's a good fit, and everybody can kind of hold everybody else accountable. I mean, that's the plan, right? And so with football, it's kind of the same way. I mean, there's no true colors, but we asked everybody to try to include Catholic in their name.
Yep.
So we have Southeast Catholic, we have St. Matthew's Catholic, we have Linden Catholic, which is Margaret Mary and Albert. Then we have St. We refer to them as East End Catholic, but it's St. Mary and St. Aloysius.
Right.
They just go by St. Mary, St. Aloysius, but
And then Central Catholic.
and then Central Catholic, which previously you mentioned Central Catholic, and then we've got Notre Dame. We respectfully refer to that as South End Catholic,
Right.
and so in our office now they haven't taken that name on by their own decision, but it's really critical that these partner schools create that momentum and that fandom, and that they find a way to draw those people from all those parishes, because the grandparents that come to a game, if it's not their parish, if it's not Ascension, you may have old time Ascension people that don't want to go to a Central Catholic game.
Hey, I get it.
So it's on these. The original question was how much work goes into it. Well, it's on these ADs and these football coordinators to try to create that energy. Not easy, not in today's world.
No,
but they do a really good job of it overall, and it's growing, and I say it's growing. It's growing again. It's gotten bigger this last year, and if we can create some more momentum and get people out to these games, not just toy bowl games, but playoff games, regular season games, and create some more of a family atmosphere, I think it'll benefit us all in the long run.
The only way we get back to schools having their own teams is enrollments have to go back up. Rich, are we on that path?
Yeah, we are, and I'm really, really excited about that. The numbers aren't out yet, but I would tell you that we supported an all-time high number of kids this year, 3,700. It's 100 more
so
than we ever did
awesome.
before.
It is, isn't it?
$8 million of funding,
Incredible.
another record. And in part, that's contributing, not the only thing, but in part we're contributing to the overall growth of our schools. And our elementary school enrollments for the 3rd year in a row are higher than they were last year. So
Third year in a row.
Yeah, 3rd year in a row. And if you look around the country, right, if you look at all, particularly larger dioceses around the country, unfortunately, that is not the case.
Right.
So we are in the Archdiocese of Louisville. We're writing our own story, and we're creating our own pathway. And quite honestly, as long as everybody's working together around creating access to
Right.
kids that want to go to Catholic schools like
Right.
we are right now, it ought to keep growing. There's capacity to grow. Keep on growing.
Heck
More
yeah.
kids in Catholic schools. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And I think we're trending in that direction for sure. And listen, it wouldn't be without the Catholic Education Foundation.
No, thanks to your organization. That's going
and I
that
hope
direction.
people understand that. I mean, it's a big
That's right.
piece of this.
No, that's what's changed. The CF's changed that.
Yeah. No, for
CF's
sure.
been responsible for changing that for the better.
100%. And and we mentioned this earlier, but another event that they sponsor is the Boys and Girls Basketball Championships. Basketball season's upon us here.
It's
We're
here.
gonna, as
Tryouts
of
coming up here in a couple
October
weeks.
23rd.
That's
We
right.
can start doing some tryouts.
That's right.
So actually, as you hear this podcast, things will be kind of underway. I've coached CSAA basketball this will be my 18th year.
That's great.
I started right out of college.
That's great.
Because I wanted to invest and give back, and I love it. I made
That's
up
great.
with it.
Well, basketball, and it always ruffles a few football coaches' feathers, but tryouts start, and some schools are still finishing up, football. They're still in the
That'll be
playoffs.
us.
But there's just not enough weekends in the calendar to, that's a tough job for a volunteer AD to tell some of the coaches, these guys got to come to basketball tryouts.
Yeah, sorry.
Again, each parish can handle it their own way, but we've got to move forward, or we won't move on to the next season.
Rick, what's the best thing about being the executive director of the Catholic Schools Athletic Association?
Working with the volunteers. I mean, unequivocally, it's the great people, Tig. It's people like yourself at Ascension. There are Jody Deming at Holy Trinity. I could go on and on. I can name several of them have done their time and moved on, right? Given their time, talent, and treasure, and their stewardship to their parishes and moved on. There are so many great ADs that we've dealt with in our office over my 12 years. That's the best part of it. Again, what I tell people, and you and I have talked about this a lot, Teague, and Rich and I have talked about this some, the CSAA are the people. They are the parishes.
people.
It's not the 4 people in our office, right? We were 3, and we hired a new guy a couple months ago. It's the 4 people in our office. Yeah, we get paid, and it's our jobs, and again, we're working for the Archdiocese, so we have a passion for what we're doing. Mm-hmm. None of us are getting rich doing it, but we love it. We want to make it. We want to see it continue to grow and continue to be great. And And the reality of that is you got to work with volunteers day in and day out. And just like anything, there's some headaches with it, but the beauty of it is there's so many great people and so many volunteers that
care.
You've heard me say this at every AD meeting. The volunteers are the heroes.
They are.
The coaches, the coordinators of these sports at the parish level. Our board of director coordinators, we have a CSAA volunteer that coordinates each sport. I mentioned Tom Wachtel, Buzzy Heim for basketball, Beth Watchlis for girls basketball. I could go on and on and on. And I wouldn't be in my job if it wasn't for my father-in-law, who was a long-term golf director, Dave Barron.
Oh, yeah.
He talked me into applying for this job. I was coming enjoying retirement and playing a little golf, and he's like, you're a sports guy. You ought to, Jim Frame's getting ready to retire. And I looked at it, I thought, I always wondered more about the CSAA. I'd played in it,
right.
I'd coached in it, but I'd never been
complained a few times, right?
I'd complained a few times. You're right. I mean, in those complaints, right? I mean, I was never a caller to complain, but there were times internally I was like, why do they do it this way? Well, now I get to make some of those decisions and have a part in that. And I want to embrace the volunteers. I tell people all the time, do not call with a complaint if you don't have an idea for a solution.
Yep.
That's just the reality of volunteer sports. It's you're gonna make some tough calls, but the beauty is still the volunteers and the wonderful people that we deal with every day.
Well, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. This is a huge. If you just look at
the network
of schools and teams and the number of sports, it's hundreds of folks that do this.
Out of the 3,700 kids that the CF's helping, Rich, take a stab. I bet a lot of them play sports, right?
I hope all of them do.
I
mean, that's part. As Rick said earlier, it is part of the experience, an important part of the experience, and we want. When that call came in a few years ago, I thought, we got to do something about that.
Right,
that ain't right. And,
right.
That's great.
And so I'm thrilled that we're doing our part, a small part, but our part in
and the board at the CF is full force behind this.
Oh, absolutely.
The other thing too, Teagan and Rich, and I want to make this abundantly clear that you don't necessarily have to play to be involved. There are kids that are managers.
Oh yeah.
At some of these grade school teams, and not as many as you might have in high school or college or wherever beyond Catholic grade schools. But there's other ways to get involved, and you can. It's just that involvement. It's just that opportunity to grow and learn.
Yeah, no, it's great. All right, as we look into the future here, Rick, what are some of the things that the CSAA is considering? Anything new? We had talked. And Rich, you probably don't know this. Maybe you do, but our listeners may not. The CSAA doesn't own a single venue. So the only way that they can host any sports is if these schools step up and run these events and lend their venues to the CSAA.
Right. Tig, I get at least, and I'm not going to disparage any part of the community, but I get at least 4 or 5 calls a year from somebody from one end of town or the other asking why they've got to drive to the other end of town to play a game when they should be able to play 5 minutes from their home or 10 minutes from their home. Well, I mean, there are 400 some odd basketball teams that have to be we play in 25 or 30 different gyms. So football is a perfect example of that. There are only 5 host sites for football, and so there are certain parts of town that don't host boys football. They don't have the facilities or the room or the volunteers, and so you can answer questions pretty quickly when you can tell them, have you thought about this, ma'am or sir? If you don't go there, your kids don't get to play. Yeah. Because your school doesn't host, and the school next to you,
the logistics around basketball with the huge number of kids in that program. You got to, trying to put that schedule together. Good luck.
Thanks to Megan in her office, she's a logistics guru, and to the system, Andrea Bevan, and to the system Game Day that helps facilitate some of these things. We're getting better, but it's an ongoing process.
It's amazing.
We still have some holes to plug and some things to improve, and we're working on that with Teague's company, and we're working on that with Megan and Andrea every day.
So, most important question of the podcast here: what school serves the best tasting concession stand food?
Oh man!
And knowing that I run Ascensions,
are you putting me on the spot?
I'm putting you on the spot here.
All right, I got an easy one, man. St. Martha's fish sandwich.
That is really good.
That's my favorite.
I think they do a great job with that fish sandwich. It's amazing. And which was so great about this question is, it goes back to the passion and the volunteers.
Right.
There's nobody making a living off of this. No. These are volunteers cooking and coming up with these different things. And St. Martha is a perfect example with that fish sandwich. It's something else. They do a good job.
That's my favorite. Now, there's good stuff in a lot of places, but that's my favorite.
Yeah, they do a good job with that one for sure. Rick, this is the second time you've been on the show, and we're so appreciative of all you do that make Catholic school sports the absolute best. the best experience for our young students. Please keep up the great work, and thank you for being here.
No, it's a privilege. It's a privilege to work with Rich and the CEF, and a privilege to be here with you, Teague. Thank you all very much for having me.
Absolutely. Rich, I mean, this is just another glowing example of why.
The answer is yes.
Thank you so much for listening. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back with podcast number 24. We're nearing 25, so we're going to have to do something special for our 25th.
You bet.
But thank you so much for listening. We will see you next month.
God bless. Thank you.